This video was made possible by you. If you want to save time and support what I do, check the link in the description that will take you to my store where you can purchase the source file for what we're creating in this video, as well as other tutorials on my channel. Thank you for your support and let's get back to the video. Alright, so let's continue building this interaction, this add to cart button. And I think we could continue by creating the cart icon, which is basically this, and we prepared a placeholder for that right next to the button here. So I think I'm going to use the pen tool, press P on my keyboard, and then I'm just going to click once, twice, hold shift down to get a straight line, click again, and then click again to finish this part. As you can see, I get this red hint that it's at the same height as the first point, so I'm gonna click that, and then finally again hold down my shift key and click one final time to finish the basic shape of the cart. Now of course we're not gonna have 6 points in terms of stroke width. I think we're gonna go for 1 or 2, maybe 3, probably just 2, depends. Let's see what the final result looks like afterwards, and then I'm going to adjust the rounding and also the ends, right? So that's going to be the stroke end points are going to be round. Now, here's the thing. I think we should be creating the final state of the cart right away, which means I'm going to just do 3 objects that we can put in here. First, let me finish the wheels actually. So let me press O on my keyboard and then click and drag to create a wheel. We got the first one, we got the second one, and yeah, I think we could maybe shrink this a little bit, make these wheels a bit larger, like 6, let's say. Yeah, I think that could work. Why don't I also turn this into a component? So let me select this, rename this to cart icon, and then I'm going to click this, which is create component. I'm going to hold down my option key, or Alt if you're on Windows, and then click and drag this, which is going to create an instance. And I'm going to place this instance inside of this button like that. Of course, because we only use black on the component, you can't see anything in here. However, if we change the the icon color to white like that, it's going to appear over here. Let's remove the placeholder. Don't need it anymore. And yeah, I think this is looking pretty good. I think we could actually, let's take a look at what the proportions look like. I think this is pretty nice. I would just say I would probably make the icon a bit smaller. I think the wheels are too big. This is just a matter of aesthetics. So of course, highly subjective. So yeah, let's just try and make something work. I'm just moving some points around to get something more that looks more balanced. Yeah, overall, I still think this icon is pretty large actually for these dimensions. So let's go for something like this. Let's try that. Why don't we? Yeah, I think this could work. Awesome. Let's just move all of this to the left edge. So it's right here. And as you can see, we actually don't need all these extra pixels. So let's just shrink this to what, 36 by 32. Yeah, I think this could work actually. I think this could work. Add to cart, maybe a bit smaller even, still. Yeah, to really fit the button. Okay, I think that works. Okay, now let's just check if it's also 6 from the top. No, it's not. Maybe we could move this a little. This is all just to make it look a bit more balanced. All right. Yeah, I think we're good. I think we're good. It's going to be 32 by a 32 point icon. Nicely balanced. Love it. Awesome. Let's create the objects inside of the cart. And to do that, I'm going to use a rectangle and draw inside of this component. I'm going to maybe adjust these points. I'm pressing enter and then clicking and using my arrows. I'm probably going to round this. So that could be one item. Then we could get something at the very bottom of the cart something that's rather long. Yeah, I think something like this could work. Let's just make sure it is somewhat pixel perfect. I'm saying somewhat because, of course, with these tiny shapes, you cannot make it completely pixel perfect. But for example, these spaces between the objects could be the same width as this actual stroke. That then makes it look balanced. Keep in mind that this is going to be the actual size we're going to see this in, which is about this big. So it's worth making it look proportional. And let me just duplicate this one, select, press Command and click this, Command D, Shift H, and move it over here. I think we could again do something like this, let's say. Yeah. So let me just play around with these vertices, enter, and let's just try what this looks like. Maybe reduce the width of this by 1 point and increase the width of this by 1 point. Yeah, I think this works. I think we're good. I think this looks like a cart full of items. It doesn't it's like sufficiently detailed, but not that detailed, so you can easily tell like from the distance what's actually going on in this little icon, which is exactly the goal. Awesome. Now let me actually remove this background. Or actually, sorry about that. First, we're gonna make sure our naming is intact. So let's just rename this layer to wheel 1, wheel 2, right? Then this is gonna be like the cart body. And let's just rearrange these, right? This is gonna be item 1. So item 1 simply because that's gonna come first, yeah? As you load the cart, the stuff at the bottom comes first. Item 2, and then item 3. And now we're gonna actually remove the background, add a variant, and then add the background to this whole component so that we can see what is going on here, yeah? Awesome. Now, the reason why I added all these elements into the default variant of this component, even though they are not going to be in the first default variant, is because we're going to be using Smart Animate to animate all these elements. And to get a smooth movement of objects, you need to have the objects present in the state you're animating from and the state you're animating to. So let's say we want to show a movement where this first item flies into the cart, right? You have to use Smart Animate between these two objects. Maybe this one could be even like hidden in terms of opacity. You want to go for Smart Animate between these two variants, essentially. But to get the actual movement, you need to have the item 2 present in both this variant and this variant. If I removed this item from this variant, then there would be no movement, right? It would just simply appear in place. We don't want that, so that is why, just to make it clear. Now let's just remove clip content to see stuff even when we move it beyond the edges of the variant. And let's refer back to this scheme. So cart is up, first item is loaded, second item is loaded, and third item is loaded. Now I think we actually need to use the second variant, select all that is inside, and then move it to the top, to the left slightly, and maybe probably rotate it a little bit. I'm gonna add, by the way, a stroke on these variants so we can see what we're working with. These, of course, are gonna be hidden in the final product, but just to see like where exactly the cart is positioned right now. So that's another state. I'm then going to duplicate this again. No, I'm then going to take these elements and move all of them into one, like a place where they're being loaded from. So let's say they're going to be falling from somewhere around here, right? They're going to as if move one by one from about this place. And then I am going to actually hide them. Okay, I'm going to hide those, but I'm going to hide them just by reducing their opacity to 0. And now remember what I said a few minutes ago about having all of these having these items in the state where you're animating to and from. Now, we don't actually need them here, but we're going to need them here and in the upcoming state, because that's what we're animating to. Here, you're animating from this state to this one just with the cart. But from here to here, you're going to be animating the objects that go inside of the cart, if that makes any sense. All right. Now, perfect. Now I'm going to take item 1 and I am going to increase the opacity to 100 and I'm going to place it into the cart, right? The first item is now being loaded. All right. So somewhere around here. Don't worry about the pixel perfection because it's rotated and then it's going to be rotated again when the cart comes down. So don't worry about that. Now, what's the next step? The next step is going to be, if we refer again to this, the second item being loaded. Yeah. So this means duplicating this again to create the initial state, to create a final frame for the animation. Now, you need to consider that there are multiple animations taking place at the same time. Okay. So I am going to, the last frame, last state of the previous animation is the first one of another one, which means we need 2 identical variants right now. So let me duplicate that again. And only here I'm going to again increase the opacity of the item number 2 and move it into quote unquote place. Move it here. Yeah. So in between here is where actually the second item is being loaded into the cart. So let me duplicate this again. And it's going to be the start of the final animation of the final item being loaded, which means I need to duplicate it again and then load the final item into the cart like that. So again, opacity to 100, move it over here and then rotate it like that, somewhere about right here, right? I think that makes sense. So let's just summarize. This is going to be animated. Yeah, and actually, as I'm doing this, I realized we actually don't need these states. We actually don't need to duplicate these because we're going to use after delay. And the after delay is going to be the determining factor of how the animation is actually going to happen. So let me actually remove these. These are just duplicates, so we can revert back anytime. So this simplifies the animation, which is nice. We should always simplify. And yeah. So let's just create the final state, which is adding a final variant. And then what I'm going to do, I'm probably just going to copy these elements to get the exact same location. And what I'm going to do for the last state is actually just take this first variant, enter, copy, and then remove these and paste it in. So that's the position of the cart that we need. Now these are going to have no rotation. Yeah, these are going to have no rotation, or maybe just 180 degrees actually. And we're going to place them inside the cart as with the initial design actually. So I believe that was this, if I'm not mistaken, right? So let's recap. We got the first state, that's the default one. Cart is up. First item is loaded. Second item is loaded. Third item is loaded. Cart is loaded and down. So these states now correspond to the plan that we have created in the previous video. And now we can actually turn this into a component, right? Let's say add to cart button. And we can start creating variants here as well. And we're going to have the same number, I believe. So that would be add a variant and then else, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's just rename these to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And let's change these variants of the cart icon inside of the button accordingly. Let's rename the variant property to animation state. And the first is going to be the first one. The second one is going to be 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. Now, why don't I actually create a new page? Let's say new page, or like test page 2, I guess. Doesn't matter. I'm going to remove these elements. And how do we link this page? We're going to duplicate this button. Yeah. And this button is going to say new test page 2. Incredibly creative naming. I know. I'm aware. Then it's going to link here. Okay. On tab, navigate to test page 2. New test page 2. Let's just test the prototype if it works. Click play. Let's scroll down. New test page 2. Excellent. It works. Let's go back. And now for the animation. Now we're going to actually see if know what I'm talking about, because we're going to see if this actually is going to work. So first, what's going to happen? Let's just go through this step by step. I see the add to cart button. I click on it, right? So I'm going to connect this one to the second one, or tab. I'm going to do on tab, action, change to variant 2. Let's just change these names as well, because cart is up, first item loaded, second item loaded, third item loaded, and then cart is down, back down, let's say. Yeah. All right. I click on the first, I click on the button, and on tab, I change to cart is up. The animation, however, is going to be smart animate. Yeah. Now let's paste this button into the test page, and let's go to the prototype, new test page 2, and let's see if this works. Yeah. What happens? You see? So nothing's going to happen afterwards, because there is no interaction defined after. But now here's how the magic's going to happen. I'm going to connect the second one to the third one, and I'm going to do after delay. This delay is going to be like 300 milliseconds. The action is going to be changed to first item loaded, and the animation is going to be smart animate. And we could do like bouncy. Let's try bouncy, and let's see what this does. Let's see what this does. You see how it's being loaded? So if I click on this, the first item is being loaded, and we need to do the same for the remaining 3. So again, after delay, I would put this delay to 1 millisecond, honestly. We want to make it instant. And we want to go for smart animate, and let's go for 300 milliseconds as well. Let's see what's here. That's also, let's make it 300 or 500 actually. Yeah, 500. Now let's test it again. Does it work? And it doesn't. The reason why it doesn't work is because we forgot to change the state of this. We forgot to put 4 in here. Okay, and now it should work. Let's see. All right, can you see how the cart is being loaded? I think that's pretty nice. And now let's just continue. Let's continue. Again, after delay, 1 millisecond, smart animate, bouncy. And then with this one, this is going to be also after delay. This could be like 400 milliseconds. And again, the same. Yeah. Now let's see what this does. Whoops, not this one, this one. All right, that's pretty sweet, isn't it? Now the button doesn't work because the action is final. We can define that later. But yeah, it's being loaded nicely. I think that's pretty cool. I think we could make it a bit faster, to be honest. So let's just play around with the speed. So on tab, let's go for 100. with the first one. Then after delay, let's remove the delay and let's go for 300. Yeah. And let's go for 300 here as well. 300, 300. And the delay could be like 150 or 120 in this case. Let's see what that does. I think I'm not a fan of the bouncy interaction. So let's remove the bouncy interaction and let's do ease in and out on the animations where the items are being loaded. So let's do ease in and out, all of these, ease in and out, ease in and out. Let's test this again. Now that's better. I like this. But again, now it's too slow. I would go even faster with the loading right now. So let's try twice as fast. How about that? 150, 150, and then 150. Here we could do bouncy. Why don't we do bouncy on, but with 500 milliseconds, where the whole card is actually being positioned. So with the first and the very last interaction, let's go for bouncy and 500. Let's see what that looks like. Nice. I like that. And I think we're gonna have to remove the after delay here. But that's already pretty fast. So I think we can quicken that up. But why does it feel so slow though? Oh, it's because of the bouncy interaction again. So let's actually change the first one, not to bouncy, but to ease in and out also. Let's test it again. Click. And I think I like that. What do you guys think? Now this is pretty sweet, although I think we could address one thing that's been going on through my mind as we've been doing this. So let's say that you want to use this button again, right? It would make sense if the button ultimately reverted back to its initial state, to an empty card in case you want to use it again, right? For that, I think we could create, this is actually going to be simpler than it sounds. So let's just create another variant of this card icon. And this is going to be actually not the card. We're just going to remove the card entirely. Then I'm going to use my pen tool and do a check mark as if items have been successfully added to the cart or something like that. You might already realize where I'm going with this, but essentially we want to do like a mini confirmation message. Let me just do it and show you, right? So we got this, and then that's it actually. So let's just add one final state. This state is going to be called success, and the success is going to have the state number 7 of the icon. Let's change that. Let's change that to 7. Just a quick reminder, this component of course contains this component, right? Although we have two components, so we're going to just use this one. This is basically a helper component. So let's say that after this whole animation is done, we're going to go after delay. And we are going to be, the delay is going to be like 200 milliseconds. We're going to change to success. And this is going to be dissolve, right? This dissolve animation is going to take 150 milliseconds. And then finally, the final animation, the final state is going to lead back to the first one. And it's going to be also after delay, let's say 300 milliseconds. Change to default, dissolve, and it's also going to be pretty quick. So we can then use this again. And now let's see what that looks like. Let's remove the lines on the variants. Remove, or just hide actually. Let's just hide those in case we need it again. Okay, so hide and reset. And let's try this. Okay, that's pretty nice. We can use it again, but I think the final animation is rather quick. Okay, so let's slow it down a little bit here, okay? Let's go for 300 milliseconds. And then let's wait here with the final one for 600 milliseconds and then take 300 milliseconds to transition. Let's see. Let's see again. Okay, loaded. Okay, that looks better. Only the delay, the final delay could be like just 50. Let's see again. Now we're just optimizing, right? All right, and I think finally we can adjust the waiting period to 400, or let's do 500 actually. 500 on this, 0 on this. Let's see. Okay, I think this looks pretty good. So it's being added to a cart and then you get a confirmation. But I also think we could make the final transition from the check mark back to the cart a little bit smoother. So what I'm going to do is the following. I am going to do this. I am going to copy the check mark. Let's just rename this to check mark. Yeah. Check mark from the last state to the first one. Then I'm going to move this outside of the frame like that. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm going to copy these objects from the first state to the last one, and I'm going to move that outside of the frame as well. However, in this case, it's going to be below the boundaries of the frame. And now some of you might already know where I'm going with this. Again, I'm going to set the final interaction to, drumroll please, smart animate, and this should move the check mark to the top and move the cart from below. Let's see. Let's go for bouncy again. Let's try 500. I have no idea what this is going to look like. Let's just see. Okay, I think this is pretty sweet. How about 800? You know, this is, some of you might be asking, why do we pay so much attention to such little detail? The thing is, you want to reward the user for taking the action you want him to take. So if you sell something online, you really want the user to reward the user with some kind of a nice animation, some kind of visual reward, some candy, eye candy. And that's pretty much it, yeah? And now just to finalize, I'm gonna hide all of these strokes. And now that the strokes are hidden, I'm also going to set the opacity of this to 0, of the cart to 0, yeah? And then here of the check mark to 0, actually. So now we get this, let's see. All right, so that looks pretty sweet. That's such a nice little thing, little like detail that adds delight to our interface. And now one final touch. Why don't I add like a green gradient, like a radial gradient, yeah. Sorry, I'm going too fast. I'm gonna go to the fill section plus, then I'm gonna sample color from here, yeah. I'm gonna go to gradient. I'm going to go to radial gradient now. I'm going to switch the order of these things, switch it. I'm gonna drag this little thing outwards while holding down Shift key. So the proportions of the gradient are 1 to 1, 1 to 1. I'm gonna move the origin of this gradient to here and then the end of the gradient to about here. And I think I'm gonna go for like reduced opacity on the gradient. And we get this little green confirmation little thing. I think that's pretty sweet. I think we could even make the, you know what I mean, make the check mark green. Awesome. This means probably the better way to go about this would be change the color of the check mark here and then change the color of the check mark here as well. Why is it called vector 28? It should be called check mark here and then check mark here. Okay. And let's reset the changes here. Reset instance. Let's see again. All right, so this is the result. What's nice about this is that maybe if you're a developer watching this or if you're part of a team, you can suggest that while this animation is happening, the action of adding items to the cart could be taking place in the background. For example, on my store, if you click add to cart, you get this little loading wheel thing, right? You get essentially this on the button while it's being added to cart. And now it might take a few seconds to add items to cart, and I think this is a pretty nice way to hide this loading time. Yeah, that's after all why you do that, right? Because it looks better than just to have a spinning wheel thing, in my opinion, probably. All right. We also discussed the hover state, but let's just quickly do hover state, yeah? Let's just do hover state. It's going to be very simple. I'm going to just duplicate the first variant. This is going to be hover. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go while hovering. Yeah. So while hovering, change to smart animate, like 200 milliseconds. Let's just test this. If it actually works, it's going to turn gray. Yeah. All right. I think it works. Brilliant. It does work. And so what if we did the second state of the icon on this? So if we get like, you know what I mean? I think this is pretty nice, no? Right, so that was very simple. We could just make it a little lighter than the gray. Let's do this one. So you can use this on your web, like desktop page as well, not only mobile. Again, hover doesn't really make sense on mobile, but it doesn't matter, it still looks cool. So this is the final result. Let's zoom in a little. Can we zoom in a little? Can I zoom in? Zoom device to fill screen? No. Am I tripping, or did Figma remove the zoom in function on prototypes? What the hell is going on? Never mind. We will do this little neat trick. I'm gonna duplicate this and I'm gonna make it larger like that. That way we can view the animation in bigger resolution. So this is the original resolution. This is for display purposes. I hover, click, and get this little nice micro interaction on the add to cart button. All right, I really enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed this too. Thanks for watching. Again, if you want to download this, if you want to buy this, if you want to use this, and you don't want to go through all the process, which you probably already went through since you're listening to this, but never mind. Check the link in the description. That will take you to my store, and there you can buy the source file for all of this. So not only what we have just created, but also the remainder of the system, right? Thanks everybody. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.